Session of Meet the Researchers. It's a session presenting cutting-edge research from the UK's universities, and it's industry-focused and also education-focused. I've just seen a message circulating in the chat that some of the attendees can't share their video. You should be able to if you refresh your page, just as a side note. So my name is Latina Nikolova. I'm going to be the moderator for this panel. And without further ado, we are going to kick off the session with a presentation from Dora Filipovic, talking about altered perceptions and using immersive sound and image to depict experiences of blindness. Dora, can you join us? Fantastic.
Yes, okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Dora Filipovic. I'm a second-year PhD student at the University of Surrey. And I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. So if we can abandon the notion that blindness can only diminish, damage, or destroy identity, and adopt instead the idea that the experience of blindness in all its varieties can in fact shape and inform other facets of personality and personal history, we will move toward a more genuinely inclusive society. So in this PhD, I propose to develop virtual reality film with immersive sound and vision, depicting the phenomenological experience of living with sight disorder, which involves accentuated attention to the auditory world. More specifically, I will research about the effects that visual impairment had on 19th and 20th century painters and how they relied on memories and listening to sounds in the scene to paint, using imagination and instinct rather than merely visual observation. The immersive film will transport our audience into an experience of someone transitioning from realism into a surreal state of imagination driven by memory and sound. Georgina Klieg is an American writer and professor of English at the University of California and one of the key thinkers for this project. Klieg was diagnosed as legally blind at the age of 11, and she has written many books in the field of disability studies on blindness and disability. And the topic of this work will also be connected by my fascination with the way blind people think using sound, which is naturally related to people working in the field of sound design. In the UK, more than 2 million people are living with sight loss, and empathy for this condition is needed by family and friends and society to facilitate care and communication and counter discrimination. Current methods of sight loss simulation involve blindfolds and vision obscuring goggles for different conditions, but do not approach the phenomenological experience of living with sight disorder. So mixed methods will be employed to address this question in this practice-based PhD informed by the literature on different sight conditions, perception, acoustics, sound design, film art, and phenomenology. This research will develop new ways of helping sighted people to understand the experience of blindness and sight impairment better. And as such, it will provide another demonstration of how media can be assistive or therapeutic. In addressing the research questions previously listed, I intend to undertake the following overlapping research phases. So character background research. This research means empathic understanding of the creative process that the artists undertake, literature and contextual reviews, meetings with blind and visually impaired artists, online consultations with academics and experts in the field of art and art history. And analyzing these practices will help to create believable characters for the story. Virtual reality film development and production, and also post-production. So working on this virtual reality film will consist of several stages. And for example, development of script will be informed by the outputs from character background research. So initial production of various prototypes will be undertaking, experimenting with different audiovisual techniques, then location scouting, which will be both real and virtual, different video processing techniques to enable the conversion of live video into that painterly depictions, and then experimenting with different painting styles derived from artists such as Monet, Degas, and Munch, and also others. Then furthermore, various 360 microphone tests will be made and selection of sound effects for incorporation. Then a full production of the virtual reality film, which is followed by the post-production involving film editing, compositing, all sound post-production, digital asset creation, and color grading. And then finally, audience engagement analysis, which is the first version, will be shown to supervisors, external professors, blind and partially sighted artists, and selected colleagues for feedback and discussion. And then various techniques will be used to collect qualitative and quantitative feedback from these audiences. And then adjustments will be made to the final virtual reality film for wider public exhibition. Also in this research, I propose to gather both symptomatic and phenomenological findings relating to sight impairment and apply these to creative expression of these deeply human experiences through film, artwork, and immersive media. And these are the three objectives and contributions of the PhD and this project. But its overall impact will be to familiarize people who are able to see with the perceptions of the blind. And this may create support, learning, and development opportunities to help blind and visually impaired people to develop the skills they will need to navigate their own futures. Of particular interest will be significant artworks, literature, films, and interactive works which address the specific phenomenology of blindness and sight impairment, as well as those which explore and experiment with audio and visual connection. So key concepts that will be investigated in this section include Merleau-Ponty's notion on perception, Michel Chion's theories of sound, Walter Murch's approaches in sound design and film, and Claude Monet's artworks, among others, etc., etc. So according to Merleau-Ponty, imagination of the sound is possible if the whole sensory being echo the vibration of the sound. So he's defining the human body as a synergic system and that everything is experienced internally in the human minds, whatever the source of stimulation is. And for Merleau-Ponty, we become who we are through our lived experiences in the world and the social world, through language and engagement with reality, and through our habits and actions. And if we talk about sound and film, sound is the one that gives the audience opportunity to see the image in a different way, and the video affects how the audience hear the sound. So Chion said, visual and auditory perception are of much more disparate natures than one might think. So the reason we're only dimly aware of this is that these two perceptions mutually influence each other in the audiovisual contract. So this contract is a figurative between the audience and the audiovisual piece, where viewers agree to think that sound and image form a single entity. And the reason why the contract is made is as a reminder that the audiovisual connection is not natural. Then referring to a book, More Than Meets the Eye, What Blindness Brings to Art by Georgina Klieg, and reviewing past curing thinking about blindness and art, she stated, "We speak of losing sight, never gaining blindness. I'm suggesting rather that there is more to the experience of blindness than might find expression in art." So Klieg is challenging us to surpass mere and rational human thinking and to let the experience of blindness teach us new ways of living. Another visually impaired artist worth mentioning is Keith Salmon from Essex, living in Scotland. And most of his paintings are depicting Scottish landscape. But to get an inspiration for the paintings, Salmon is climbing the mountain peaks and recording sound atmospheres from the places he visits. And he uses these recordings as a sketchbook to bring back memories from the walks when he is in the studio. But with his artwork, Keith Salmon is transferring a whole impression of his walks to the canvas using sound recordings as a reference and to provoke feelings and memories of a particular landscape. And if we talk about Monet, his cataract started to develop in 1912, and it was evident in his use of colors. He continued to paint until the summer of 1922, And in 1923, he had 3 eye surgeries, which gave him back his eyesight. But painting outdoors, Monet learned that everything that is painted on the spot possesses a certain energy and life, which is not possible to recreate in the studio. So the impression was a visual contact with the landscape or other objects in just one moment. So the eye does not have the capacity to notice all the details in one moment, but with longer observation, the brain collects the sum of experiences, imagination, and observation, creating that first impression. Monet's intention was to show what was the visual freshness of the first impression, which is free from the observation categories. So when we look at a painting, do we imagine what it sounds like? Do we focus on the details, or do we hear a whole environment? And what will happen to a painter if he or she becomes blind or visually impaired, like Monet or Munch? And if we disconnect their sense of sight, how do other senses react to the surroundings, and does the sense of hearing help them to provoke imagination and creativity? So these questions relate to a broader investigation of what the experience of sight impairment feels like, and how their resulting reliance on an enhanced sense of hearing affects their relationship with the world around them. So thank you for listening. This is my contact and my Twitter account where you can message me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Dora, for this presentation, highlighting that the visual is not the only approach to art creation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next talk is by Kaufman from Nottingham, talking about Animal Crossing, kindness, and combating isolation in game theory. Imo, would you like to join us on the stage and tell us about your project?
Hello. Does that look okay? Yeah. Cool. So hello. Like Slatina said, I am a first-year PhD student at the University of Nottingham. I'm funded by M4C and AHRC, and my PhD is a collaborative doctorate with the British Games Institute for BGI and the National Video Game Museum. I'm here today to talk about the National Video Game Museum's Animal Crossing Diaries project. Broadly speaking, the project seeks to understand the impact of video games under lockdown by investigating the play of the Nintendo Switch game Animal Crossing: New Horizons. Animal Crossing is a valuable site to explore ideas of isolation and kindness under lockdown because of its potential for social interaction, both virtual and real, its design of affordances for player agency, and the familiarity and control it offers as a design space. Today, I will talk about how the project is going, some of our initial findings, and our plans moving forward. So very quickly, I'll just go through the contents. I'm going to summarize what the project is about, and then I will explain what the game Animal Crossing itself is about. I will talk about how we gathered our data, our initial findings, and the 3 themes that have so far emerged from them, and then talk about our next steps. So the project itself is funded by a grant from the Esme Fairbairn Foundation and Museum Association to collect histories of people who've been playing Animal Crossing under lockdown. In other words, to try and capture a lived experience of playing Animal Crossing during the pandemic. The project intends to investigate experiences of Animal Crossing during lockdown and understand why the game means so much for so many people and how the pandemic has shaped this impact. The project will be aligned with the MVM's own goals to capture moments of and humanize video game history with an honest and inclusive approach. One of the project's central goals is also to experiment with how we capture histories of play in video game experiences through different research methods and approaches. And furthermore, how the MVM as an institution will preserve and historicize these experiences in the future. Research methods include oral history and collection of other visual media from participants, such as artwork, diary entries, and screenshots. Current intended research outcomes, the development of an exhibition at the MVM and an online archive, which will be used to record the findings of this project. At this point in time, the museum is collecting initial data from participants and collating it. So what is Animal Crossing? Animal Crossing itself is a non-linear real-time video game in which the player travels to a deserted island and helps build a community. The player develops their home and also helps design and decorate the surrounding town and areas. As the player does so, anthropomorphic villagers move to the island and interact with the environment. The player may partake in repetitive tasks, such as fishing, chopping wood, and catching bugs. Doing such tasks will allow the player to craft new items, sell bugs and fish for bells, the in-game currency, and donate new specimens to the museum, enriching the island's culture. Animal Crossing New Horizons was released on the cusp of the UK's national lockdown on the 20th of March last year. Since then, it has sold over 22 million copies and is one of Nintendo Switch's best-selling games. As we are still experiencing the pandemic, its impact on our relationship with video games is ongoing, but the context of the pandemic cannot be removed from our wider understanding of Animal Crossing. The time and place that Animal Crossing embodies is still developing and cannot be looked at retrospectively yet, but must be understood as a past, present, and future moment in video game research. So, our open call. Our open call was advertised across all social medias, and participants can submit their data through our website. The call itself is very open and non-judgmental, and participants are invited to submit their thoughts, feelings, and experiences in any way that suits them. The examples we gave on the website included diary entries, videos of yourself or friends talking about your experiences, screenshots of the game, and artwork or comic strips, but we did encourage them to submit anything they want. And we tried to make the call as open as possible, so if participants were unable to use the form we provided online for any reason, they could contact us directly instead. Now we'll talk about what we have received. So, our initial findings. Currently, we have about 150 submissions to the project. Our open call still has about another month left, but so far we have an amazing range of material that includes artwork, diary entries, music, comics, and more. Here we have the tag summary of our first 148 submissions, which shows the initial themes that have emerged in our project so far. And surprisingly, pandemic and social tags are very prominent across all submissions. And across the tags so far, 3 main themes have emerged, which I will discuss momentarily. Something that we have noticed in our initial findings is that the way people are compelled to record their Animal Crossing experiences is notable and unique. For example, keeping a diary specifically about what you're doing in Animal Crossing the game. Through this project, one question we would like to further explore is why do players feel compelled to record Animal Crossing in such unique ways? So our first theme is relationships. Relationships between players, but also relationships between players and non-playable characters, which are also known as NPCs, and how Animal Crossing can relate to our real-life relationships too, even outside the game. The community potential for Animal Crossing in terms of real-life interactions is expansive. It allows fellow players to visit each other's islands, give tours, share items or recipes, and talk to each other. Over lockdown, this allowed people to hang out with their friends, scatter with family, and even go on dates with romantic partners. Players also built strong relationships with their NPC villages in Animal Crossing too. Many submissions make it clear that in some aspects these relationships feel real. Animal Crossing provides virtual community for its fictional villages. In-game, you may talk to them every day, you may establish secret phrases with them, and if you leave the game for weeks at a time, when you return, the villagers will express concern at your absence, and they will say that they have missed you. At a time when seeing our friends, family, and loved ones has often been impossible or unsafe, the safe and tangible digital community, both real and virtual, that Animal Crossing has provided is truly important. Participants also had great candor about Animal Crossing and their experiences with mental health in our submissions. Players also made memorials to people they have lost during the pandemic in Animal Crossing, and for some the game has been a way of processing loss and grief. These memorials are somewhere the player can return to in Animal Crossing, a place they can visit, which leads us to our second theme, Animal Crossing as a place. Animal Crossing is evidently more than just a game in our current findings. It is talked about and functions as a place. Participants talk about going to their island, meeting others there. It exists as a stable, constant location that can be visited, planned around, and used as a venue. As I mentioned in the previous slide, some people built memorials in Animal Crossing that they could continually revisit, such as a remembrance garden. More than just being a digital location, Animal Crossing is a place with its own social rules, etiquette, and expectations. We saw this when the Melbourne Fringe Festival did interviews in Animal Crossing this year, when gifts and outfits were exchanged prior to interviews in-game, which would not have happened in a normal in-person context. In Animal Crossing, however, when visiting someone else's island, it is customary to exchange gifts and sometimes outfits. Therefore, in our findings so far, it has not simply been a one-way interaction. Events are not just moving into Animal Crossing, but Animal Crossing itself is having an impact on social interactions in-game. Others have also used Animal Crossing as a place to grow other events during the pandemic, such as the YouTube channel Can Gaming, who used Animal Crossing to host a wedding and a gender reveal party for their baby. Another aspect unique to Animal Crossing as a place is the way events are universally experienced. The game has no set story a player works through, but rather events happen in real time, such as Halloween in October and Toy Day on the 24th of December. This means that players, no matter how much of the game they have played, all experience events at the same time on the same day. So it is easier for players to share their collective experiences, and furthermore, the collective idea of Animal Crossing differs far less between players. Therefore, Animal Crossing offers a far more stable idea of place, arguably, than many other games like it, such as Stardew Valley. Finally, the island in Animal Crossing is also a place the player can build upon or design. Animal Crossing as a design space affords the player a considerable amount of freedom. You may spend a day decorating your house, chopping wood, and fishing, or doing nothing at all. For some players, it may be enough to simply walk around the island and enjoy its digital landscape without feeling an urge to change it, which leads us on to our final theme, creativity. Not only have many of the submissions, writing, art, and music been very creative, but Animal Crossing itself has been a significant creative outlet for players. Many have made films in Animal Crossing or recreated entire plays or music videos. Every island itself is inherently unique, and some people have created artwork or designs in that island's physical landscape. The player can design the island with a great deal of freedom. Through the use of custom designs, which can be used to design clothes, but also tiles to place on the island's ground, have allowed players to create very creative and innovative islands, such as the construction of complete cities, or even recreations of levels in video games like Pokemon or Zelda, the latter of which can be seen in the right-hand image. This degree of freedom means that every island is unique, a personal and individual creation. More generally, Animal Crossing has been a great way for people to express their creativity in lockdown. We have seen fashion shows, in-game mazes and puzzles for friends to solve, and recreations of islands into pieces of art. Others have also made outfits designed after famous characters, for example, Doctor Who. Even amongst all this creativity, some submissions have still managed to pleasantly surprise us. One of the most unique submissions we have received is a participant taking their turnip prices for a month in-game and converting those numbers into music. Animal Crossing is a game with great design affordances and scope for creativity, so it's not a surprise that our project submissions have been so diverse and creative themselves. Before I conclude, I would like to share one submission from our open call. Here is a comic that got submitted that I believe is emblematic of all the themes I have discussed today. For Dan and Caroline, Animal Crossing was somewhere they both worked on and played together. It was not only a way to interact with each other, but also to interact with villagers, which they describe as friends. We can see creativity not only in this comic itself, but also when it tells us that Caroline liked designing, when it describes the different aspects of play both Caroline and Dan enjoyed. And finally, we can see Animal Crossing as a place. And the final slide depicts Caroline getting her own Switch to play Animal Crossing on and leaving Varda to start her own adventure on her own island. In a sense, she physically leaves the island to move to another, taking her belongings with her, but leaving Varda and the villagers there behind. This is just one example of our submissions, but I think it demonstrates the potential of our project and also the incredibly personal nature of much of the data we've received so far. The National Video Game Museum's project, the Animal Crossing Diaries, will contribute to an alive and developing field of research in which we learn how to humanize and historicize the individual and subjective experiences of play, and we are really excited by what we have found so far. Our next stages of research are finalizing our open call and then deciding which participants to approach for interviews to discuss their experiences more in depth. Most interviews will be with the average player, as we want to try and capture the everyday lived experience of Animal Crossing, and furthermore the impact of COVID in this everyday experience of the game. Moving forward, the museum will do an exhibition of our findings, which will most likely be online. And if anyone would like to get involved, I have posted the link to the Animal Crossing Diaries project here, and you can also follow the MVM on Twitter for more updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Imo, for this fascinating presentation that really highlights how the digital spaces that we create have become equally important to us as the physical spaces we inhabit, especially in the last year. I personally would love to see a fashion show in Animal Crossing.
So very good.
Yeah, I think that'll be a highlight, I think, right now. Next up, we have Richard Hemming from the Storyfutures Creative Cluster based at Royal Holloway, University of London. Richard will talk to us about the project Modern Collectibles. Richard, would you like to join us on stage?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Just sharing my screen. Hope that all okay. My name's Rich. I'm a doctoral researcher with Storyfutures at the Royal Holloway, University of London, here to talk today about modern collectibles. Specifically, my role in the project of and spatial audio with ARKit and also using CoreML as well. This particular project was in collaboration with Discovery Channel and was also with Story Things, with Royal Holloway University and Storyfutures itself. So the Discovery Channel partnered with Storyfutures, and we created the Modern Collectibles kind of brief, which was a call out, and essentially that was to produce a TV pilot with an accompanying augmented reality app, and this was specifically an Apple iOS application. We deliberated over lots of objects, but essentially there are sort of modern collectibles around 80s retro objects, the Pac-Man, the Adidas trainer, and the AT-AT. So this study is an investigation into how immersive audio design for AR can be used to bring objects and the stories behind these modern collectibles to the users specifically, what are the emotional responses, as well as can we get greater engagement in the show's subject and online offerings, which is obviously of for Discovery. Now, just some of the research context. Essentially, Stefan Schutz is coining the term new realities, giving us opportunities to have new implementation paradigms in academia and also relative to industry. Alongside of that, our kind of notions of touch with digital and AR assets are really impacting the boundaries of phenomenology and the way that we kind of experience interacting with these digital objects. What's remarkable is that kind of we are aware that audio brings a sensation of immersion to a particular experience. That sense actually comes from, is being exacerbated by a new technology. However, the capture abilities are actually very old. So some of the things that are coming to fruition these days from psychoacoustic research is
I think you may have lost one of the speakers. Oh well. Well, while we are waiting for him to rejoin, perhaps we can move on to the next speaker, which is Rahman. He's going to talk to us about the project Away to Mars. And in the meantime, we'll try and put Richard back on. Shama, would you like to join us in the field? Yeah, Shama, if you just press the join button and you should be able to join. Oh dear, these are the pitfalls of digital conferences. I do apologize for the delay. Give us a couple of minutes and we'll sort it.
Hi, Santi. I thought I'd join you on screen so you didn't have to fill in too many gaps. I think Richard was using Keynote, which takes over your entire screen, so he wouldn't have seen any of the messages. So hopefully he'll hear us now, though, if we say his name enough. Otherwise, he might still be powering through his presentation. And otherwise, hopefully, Shama is still around somewhere. I can see she's in the room.
She is. She's struggling to join as well.
I'm afraid I don't think I'd be up to par presenting either of their works either.
No.
Ah, Shama's here.
Yes, she is. We just can't get her. Oh, there she is.
I'll leave you to it.
Aha.
Yes. We've overcome the digital barrier. Finally. Well, I'll leave you in the capable hands of Dr. Shama Rahman and her presentation on A Way to Mars.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Shama Rahman, and I am the R&D project lead for a fashion technology company pioneering in what they're doing called A Way to Mars. I've been asked to join as my background is a neuroscientist and an artist, and utilizing that knowledge of creativity within my PhD, which was actually investigating the neuroscience and the different mental modes that one switches into within the creative process, and different stages of the creative process, and of course different creative processes that within themselves, and bring those things together, how to essentially create a platform for co-creation for A Way to Mars. I'd actually like to introduce with a series of videos what we've been up to, and right at the beginning I'd like to introduce the actual sort of CEO of A Way to Mars, Alfredo Orobio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you'll be able to see that. Oh, hello, Sam. Thank you. Here we go. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. One second. It's the wrong one that I had. Here we go. So on that note, just to show you a little bit of what we've been doing here, the aim for us is how can we facilitate collaborations and co-creation within the fashion world. And that's not only for designers who have the sort of the craft and skill to create something, you know, from conception till the final end product, but also the consumer of said fashion. And in particular, I've been interested in how to bring in AI into this whole process in order to spark creativity, in order to also enable sort of better and more creative decision making as well. And here are sort of like a selection of different sort of AI and human collaboration so far within the project. And as you've heard and seen, it's something that has been supported by the creative clusters, the BFTT and the UKRI, and is something that we presented at Beyond 2020 in November, a few months ago. And here you see a little bit of some of the experiments that I've been doing. So it is utilizing a whole number of different types of visual AI that's been happening. So up on the top left, you can see This is actually using something called a generative adversarial network in order to produce these quite complex, quite beautiful, quite sophisticated prints, which seems to be the most interesting and inspiring thing that and surprising as well that the AI has given us. And at the bottom left, you can also see, there are, what we've done here is that we've actually combined Away to Mars's existing sort of databases of dresses from their lead designer, and also from some of their previous co-creative projects, with another sort of different source of data sets. In this case, sort of sketches of botanicals and birds, and then we've seen how the two sort of sources of inspiration have been synthesized again with a GAN. And you can see, this is the bottom left, I'm trying to take your notice to. You can see that, in some ways there are some very similar to each other sort of outputs, which are kind of organized in these sort of little rows. And so from that front, it allows, say, potentially, the human to sit there and curate and being like, okay, here's some versions, lots of different versions of this. And then, could this be something of interest? Maybe I'll click on this one. Maybe this is the final one that I really enjoy. But then you can see also as well, a more sort of finished and a sort of different product that's sort of squared by the red edges there. And my particular interest are all those sort of different squares in the middle that look like a liminal space, for those designers who also want, a very sort of out of the box, super out there curveballs, essentially, liminal spaces of injecting and sparking a bit of creativity. To me, in fact, the second one down, it does look a little bit like a strange sort of bird of paradise there. And then if I take your attention back to the top in the middle, so you see again, so just next to the textural prints, there are some other experiments that we've been doing, also combining, say, those initial sort of textual prints that have just been generated, nothing to do with, say, Away to Mars's current collection, but then being combined with different colors, and then also with Away to Mars's collections, and also inspirations, again, this time not say from birds, but say from mountains. So we're really looking at how different areas, different domains, different disciplines, whether it's photography or whether it's sketches, whether it's of different areas altogether in terms of life, not just from fashion, not just from design patterns, but actually, we just mentioned nature quite a lot here, and what that could look like. And then on the top right hand side, if we're just looking at it from a perspective like a toolkit and a palette to enable our consumers to just be like, okay, I want to have this color, I want to have this sort of like pattern of color, I want to then combine it with texture. And then right at the sort of bottom right hand corner, you see some of the more interesting prints that have come through, which is actually a combination of all of these different sort of attributes, not just using GANs, but maybe multiple GANs in a chain, also using multiple forms of inspiration from Away to Mars's own collections, but then also using style transfers in order to then combine them with things like colors and textures as well. And then we have, some, as I mentioned, curveballs all the way out there, and some people might even be, familiar with one particular one called Google Deep Dream, which is one right at the sort of edge left here, which again has been trained with lots of different sort of animal inputs, actually, trying to create something kind of psychedelic. And we've now got some exciting news in the sense that we've taken some of these AI human collaborative generated prints. We have then also presented this to Away to Mars's current consumer, followers, designer, network and community that exists at the moment, and we've asked them to choose one of these, and we've actually now had it made. So would love to show you these. So these are from the selections here as well. And this one was the one that was actually selected. So here's a little sneak peek at what it now looks like. So that was the other video that I started off with. So let me just show you that. Here we go. And And there you have it. You see Away to Mars's lead designer cutting and actually translating this AI human collaborative print into a real sort of print that's been on a dress that she has then cut and put together and then modeled for us right at the end. So literally from digital to real life, we now have our first sort of AI human created dress, so which we're really excited about. And pretty much that's it from me. This is what we are looking towards building now into a sort of MVP that will be integrating with Away to Mars's existing platform. And as soon as it's done, we would love to invite as many people to come and play with our AI and be creative with their own fashion design. So just a little background about me. I mentioned that I have a PhD in the neuroscience of creativity. And I bring in a lot of the angles of stimulation, whether it's from acting, from music, from design, a lot of things from arts and sciences come together. And using this approach, which is AI driven and neuroscience designed, I also have my own company looking at how AI could be used to augment creativity. In my case, with NeuroCreate, looking at in the area of language. So bringing in all of this, I'm super excited to be able to, bring in this sort of experimental knowledge and passion towards Away to Mars's co-creation journey here. So if you'd like to get in touch, please do. Here are my details.
Thank you, Shama. That was really fascinating on not just about how fashion can be created these days, but also just about AI and human co-creativity, something that we've been reading about, but now we're actually seeing it come to life. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And also for your video, just these visuals to actually see it happening.
I just saw that Sam was saying they're a bit choppy. I hope they came across okay. We've been working pretty hard to try and get that video ready for you guys, and actually the dress is now printed, so very happy about the fact that it became something reality, in real life that we can hold on to.
Fantastic.
That tangibly feel.
It's almost like magic. It sounds like magic. It probably isn't, but it sounds like it. If you like, you can pop the links to the videos in the chat as well, so that people can view them once again, if it didn't come across very clearly on their end.
Yes, and some of the things actually be super interesting to get everybody's feedback as well. Is that we've been working a little bit with some A/B testing, as to what people's perceptions will be in terms of how they would use an AI in the whole creative process. And we've been getting consumers kind of going, oh my God, this is really cool because we can see this as a playful toolkit, a game, a palette of sort of different techniques that we can choose, which the AI is helping us, to create our dream dress or, our dream sort of shirt, whatever it is. Whereas with the designers, they're like, great, how can the AI, push us further? We have our craft, we know how to do this, but, how can we be inspired further? So I think it's a really exciting time for, how we can start using this in a way that's symbiotic, augmenting what we're doing, already, how our own sort of technological advances can help us back.
Fantastic. That's really amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your project. I think we're going to try and bring Richard back from the Hopping Ether and see if he can talk to us about modern collectibles. Here he is. Richard is coming on stage. Thank you, Shama. And here's Richard. Hello.
Hello.
Can you imagine getting lost in a virtual space? Could you imagine sort of getting lost in a physical space?
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. There was quite an interesting one.
Yeah. Well,
so
let's give it another go.
Let's give it another go. Anyway, thank you. I'll just share my screen and hopefully we'll be okay. Right, so modern collectibles, yes, basically this is a Storyfutures and Royal Holloway University of London project. I'm doing a PhD in electronic engineering. I predominantly do a lot of audio work for Storyfutures alongside of the PhD. This particular project was the Discovery Channel partnering with Storyfutures for the modern collectibles. And the idea was to produce a TV pilot with an accompanying augmented reality app, specifically an Apple iOS application. This is a collab between Storyfutures, Discovery, but also Story Things from Brighton, an immersive storytelling company, and based in Royal Holloway, University of London. These were the three objects that we managed to finalise on after some deliberation, and they're all based around the 1980s. This study is an investigation specifically into how immersive audio design for AR can be used to bring those objects and the stories behind them to life in the modern collectibles, and specifically in the user's hands, and what emotional responses can we actually get from that, and will this actually drive greater engagement with the show's content, which is really in line with what Discovery were looking for. The research context of this is Stefan Schutz, for example, coins the term new realities, which means that we've got new implementation options, new paradigms in academia, but are also beneficial for industry. Some fascinating kind of notions of touch with digital AR assets, our real hand impacting with digital AR assets in front of us in a phenomenological experience. What's remarkable is that the older technologies such as ambisonic recording techniques, which have been around for many years, and also the nature of sound increasing a sense of immersion, are kind of being exacerbated by us using these XR, AR, VR, XR technologies. Gordon Kalea, his user involvement model was really poignant because this project was talking about interaction in the spatial element and narrative and ludic elements in there. And Stefania Serafin's particular research is really interesting to me into sonic interaction design because of what role does audio play in that loop. I decided to employ procedural audio. This is something that's been around since the 90s, computer generated audio, but to physically model the sounds. If you recorded fire, for example, this would just be in a normal waveform, and in fact the implementation could be quite restrictive, whereas if you actually model the sound in code or computer generated audio using something like pure data, then in real time we can actually interact with objects and you can control them parametrically, so you get a real-time parametric control with an AR object. The innovative pipeline that we created, we use Unity and we use ARKit alongside of CoreML, which is the computer vision arm of that from Apple. The graphics were done in Cinema 4D. Everything was driving parametrically things in pure data, where I was working, and then was spatialized with Google Resonance post PD patch. This was deployed on iOS devices that were AR capable, and we did some studies where we were checking to see whether headphones or without headphones was impacting the experience, and also implementing sort of binaural and ambisonic techniques alongside that at the same time. We were looking to do controls of touch and hold, and velocity. They were the three things that we were kind of looking for. So the objects, you kind of had to assess what we could do. Well, the Pac-Man's got buttons and joysticks. We could turn and spin all of the objects and interact with them in different ways. And the special one, which was the AT-AT, on a personal level, we could have lasers and scale the object and or interact with it in multiple ways. This meant actually then going and recording and using photogrammetry to go and snap those actual objects from the 80s. So this is the Pac-Man cabinet original, and then sort of inserting that into this innovative pipeline. So we would go and grab the object, digitize it. I would then make PD patches around the sound design and interactions that you could have with that particular object, and then it'd be inserted into the app for the completion of the pipeline. So there's quite a lot going on there, and also the CoreML implementation was looking at the hand gestures and hand movements in order to interact with that AR asset. So we managed to implement touch and hold and velocity, and there were some really interesting different techniques that were used in each scene. These were for research purposes, so different interactions, different delivery methods, different ways that we were checking in terms of R&D. What was clear was that the CoreML signal could be interpolated really well by pure data. The signal coming from CoreML is actually percentage data and is really, really tricky to work with. So this needs smoothing in order to have kind of smooth sound design. and then go into your synthesis model. And in fact, there are some built-in elements in Pure Data which can really help with this already. So some of the research development findings were that the output data from CoreML, which is gestural recognition control data, is inherently convoluted. Like I said, it's percentage based, but logic can be established in order to make this data more usable and massage it into smooth sound design. In fact, we employed with programmers state checking of the intersection of going into the mesh as you are interacting with an AR object, and we could actually take velocity and angle of intersection with the mesh to control sound design in real time. PD has already got a lot of these control rate, signal rate things built in, as discussed. So it was a really powerful tool for me to use at this time. And also we had multiple elements of gain, filtering, frequency, all dynamically and parametrically being driven by CoreML in real time. And some of the previous researchers in this area, Andy Farnell and Christian Heinrichs, their techniques are highly functional in this context. In terms of story, instead of audience testing, we essentially went for online survey because of world events. However, we went for 100 participants is what we were after. We actually got a lot more than that through our SF panel, thanks to Andy Wood's design. And we used repeated measures design. Predominantly, we were looking for enjoyment, shareability, replayability, and the level of presence. And also, because of the number of testing and rounds that we had, we actually started doing some additional studies on top of that as well. Early research, sort of internally testing, indicated that immersive audio design coupled with gestural control had a positive impact on engagement in the context of AR and contributed to bringing the modern collectibles to life through invoking nostalgia. What was great was that very recently we actually did some additional sound studies, and this was looking into how much did the sound add to the experience. Well, from this data on the right-hand side graphic, we can see that in terms of the non-dynamic, well, we used a non-dynamic version, and then we had a procedural audio version, which was fully interactive. And we could see that it actually added very much so to the experience. So on a business level, this was an interesting finding. However, there was some really interesting data that was coming out from the use of headphones. And from digging into this data a bit further, it would be suggestive that because AR sound design was spatialized around the device itself, there was no head tracking that was actually being involved in the experience and merely spatialized from moving around the objects. So I think that from this data, we can see that HRTF implementation for an AR experience would need to be implemented to further that experience. So that's something else for us to look into. Anyway, thankfully, these will run through SF panel remotely. We will be putting a full report together for this come mid-2021 in a very short period of time. My references, and thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Richard, very much for this presentation, and what a fantastic comeback after the hopping curveball. Can I just ask a very quick question? The objects that you selected, how did you select them? What was the rationale?
Well, this was tricky because of so many people involved in the project with their own ideas of what those retro objects were. So I was born in the 80s, and clearly for me, the big one was Star Wars, really, the AT-AT. What was really interesting as well is not only your own personal kind of nostalgic journey, but also what would be a great object in terms of interaction. So what elements does that particular object have? And the AT-AT, for example, had legs and moving parts, and you could turn the device, and it also had a laser on top of it as well, which was really cool for implementation and interactive audio purposes. So it was half your own personal nostalgia, plus actually would this be a great object for you to interact with?
Amazing. So really fascinating. Thank you very much for sharing your research.
Thank you.
And good luck with the rest of the work on the project. Unfortunately, this is all we have time for, but I think we should all give a very strong round of applause to all of our research, wherever we are in time and space right now. I should say that this was one of the first sessions, so I think we all deserve some praise for even despite the technological difficulties. And please check out the researchers' work on the Audience of the Future Live website where you can see all of their posters and all of their contacts. Please do get in touch. I'm sure that they would love to hear from you. Thank you very much, and please enjoy the rest of the sessions at UK House.